Clara, my sister-in-law, is undeniably a kleptomaniac, but her family refuses to acknowledge it. Instead, they choose to ignore the issue, claiming she shows no signs of kleptomania. The first time I met Stephen's family was quite the eye-opener, especially when it came to his sister. While everyone else was warm and welcoming, Clara seemed to decide right from the start that she didn't like me at lunch. She barely acknowledged my presence and avoided any interaction. I tried to strike up a conversation with her, even accompanying her to the restroom, hoping to clear the air privately. What I saw in the restroom, though, caught me off guard. There she was, casually taking tissue paper from the restroom and stuffing it into her purse, which I found both gross and odd. Our eyes met, and she seemed shocked that I'd caught her in the act. I chose not to say anything and gracefully left the situation. Later, I felt like I had to bring it up with Stephen, not wanting to embarrass her or make things worse after the awkward incident. But Stephen's response completely threw me off. He just laughed it off, saying her behaviour wasn't a big deal and that she probably needed the tissue for something. He told me I was overthinking it for no reason. While I tried to let it go and accept his explanation, it didn't sit right with me. Over the years, I've noticed similar situations where Clara would take odd items from different places, making me more convinced she has kleptomania. One time, Stephen's mother, Janice, invited me on a shopping trip. I was excited to spend some one-on-one time with her, but when I got to the mall I realised Clara was coming with us too. I greeted her politely, but she just nodded in acknowledgement, without saying anything. As Janice and I browsed through the mall looking for new clothes, Clara was following us the whole time. While we were trying on outfits, I noticed Clara repeatedly going into the fitting rooms with clothes, but never coming out with any. She'd claimed that none of the dresses fit her or looked good, even though she tried on several. At first I didn't think much of it, and assumed it was just her personal taste. After we left the store and stopped for ice cream, Clara generously offered to pay for everyone. She unzipped her purse to grab her wallet. I noticed a familiar blue dress inside Clara's purse, the same one she had tried on earlier in the fitting room but rejected because it was supposedly too tight. I couldn't understand why the dress was in her bag, and it immediately set off alarm bells. So I asked her when she bought it because I hadn't seen her make the purchase. Janice overheard my question and also noticed the dress in Clara's bag. Clara quickly tried to hide it by closing her purse and avoiding eye contact with me. It was clear Clara had stolen the dress, and I stared at her in disbelief as she fumbled for an excuse. But before she could explain, Janice jumped in to downplay the situation, saying Clara probably took it by accident, and that many people do that unintentionally. I was stunned by her reaction, and I think my mother-in-law noticed my expression because she quickly backtracked. She claimed she had no idea Clara would do something like that, and suggested we just forget about it. I said if it was really an accident, we should fix it by returning the dress, but Janice insisted it wasn't necessary, pointing out that the store was a big chain with plenty of inventory, and if Clara did steal one dress, it wouldn't really hurt them. Despite her efforts to brush it off, I stood my ground. I insisted we go back and pay for the dress, telling them they could come with me or not. Reluctantly, Janice and Clara agreed to go back to the store, and in the end, I had to pay for the dress because Clara didn't have enough money. The whole situation left a bad taste in my mouth. Later that evening, I brought it up with Stephen. I told him what had happened and how uncomfortable it made me. To my surprise, Stephen told me I should have just let it go and not embarrassed his sister, claiming it didn't really hurt anyone. His response frustrated me. I told him I couldn't ignore my moral obligation, even if his family seemed to tolerate that kind of behaviour. Stephen got defensive, and the conversation quickly escalated into an argument. He demanded I apologise for what I said about his family, but I refused. The argument became so heated that I even considered breaking up with him if we couldn't find a middle ground. Thankfully, After a few days of reflection, Stephen came back with an apology. We had a long, heartfelt conversation and agreed that fighting over family wasn't worth risking our relationship. He admitted he was protective of his sister, but understood why I felt the way I did and even offered to pay me back for the dress. I declined his offer. Since then, I've decided to keep quiet when it comes to Clara. The second incident involving Clara happened at Stephen's cousin's baby shower. The event was full of excitement and joy as everyone arrived with gifts from the registry. Stephen's cousin, who was just 2 months away from giving birth, had a noticeable baby bump and was beaming with happiness. We helped her cut the cake and unwrap some of the gifts, sharing in her excitement. Later, I excused myself to use the restroom as I passed past the bedroom. I was surprised to find Clara searching through all of the gift boxes and sorting through the items, evidently hunting for anything to steal. And my heart fell, as I knew what she was going to do. Clara intended to steal from a pregnant woman who needed these products considerably more than she did. Although I had promised myself not to say anything about Clara's behaviour after the last incident, I couldn't stand by and let her take from someone so helpless. Previously, denying an expectant woman critical products for her newborn due to Clara's kleptomania was unbearable. Despite my desire to avoid conflict, I felt I needed to interfere in some manner, knowing Clara would be ashamed if exposed. I chose to handle the issues delicately. I took a few steps back and cleared my throat, feigning to pass by again, hoping Clara would get the message. As I reached the bedroom, I greeted her casually, as if I was just passing by. Clara's reaction was quick. She instantly stopped rummaging, stood up, and left the bedroom to join the visitors in the main area. I watched her go, shocked at the extent she would go to satisfy her obsession. It was evident to me how troublesome and improper her behaviour was, which made me even more concerned about her presence at family events. This time, I opted not to discuss it with Stephen because I didn't want another useless confrontation in which he defended his sister and pretended she didn't have a serious problem. The final nail in the coffin occurred at our wedding. My mother had given me a set of exquisite blue earrings that had been passed down through generations of our family. It was an extremely emotional moment when she presented them to me, telling me that one day I'd be able to pass them on to my own children. These earrings were my something blue for the wedding ceremony, and I treasure them dearly. After the ceremony was completed, and Stephen and I were formally married, I intended to change into a more comfortable attire for our reception so that I could move around and dance with my family and friends. I left the earrings in my bridal chamber, sure that they would be secure. The setting seemed respected and safe, and the only individuals there were our wedding guests, whom I completely trusted. The reception was a happy event. Stephen and I danced the night away, enjoying the love and pleasure that surrounded us. I couldn't believe he was now my spouse. It was an ideal night, full of laughing and joy. However, when my bridesmaids and I went to the bridal suite to gather our belongings in the early morning, I discovered that the earrings were stolen. Panic came in as soon as I looked around the room. I knew all of my bridesmaids well. My childhood buddies would never take from me. Everyone began hurriedly scouring the room, thinking that the earrings had merely dropped or become missing someplace. My pulse raced as we tore the place apart, inspecting every nook and corner. I was freaking out and weeping. I am devastated by the loss. These earrings meant considerably more to me than their monetary worth. They symbolise my family's heritage. As we continued to seek, an awful suspicion started to seep into my head. I knew that just one person at our wedding could steal. Throughout the evening, I observed Clara acting abnormally. She had been lingering about the wedding area earlier, and she had gone AWOL throughout the reception for an extended while. In reflection, her general behaviour seemed suspect. My heart fell as I contemplated the probability that she had taken the earring, knowing she enjoyed stealing. Confronting Clara was the last thing I wanted to do on my wedding night, but the fear of losing such a valuable family relic was too much. I took a long breath to calm my anxieties, then walked up to where she was standing, surrounded by the rest of our family. With all the calm I could muster, I inquired whether she'd noticed my earrings. Clara's eyes widened and she blurted out a denial, but her reaction just strengthened my conviction. My bridesmaids, sensing the tension, clustered around us, their faces mixed with anxiety and mistrust. As I pressed her more, the air in the room became heavy with discomfort, and my voice trembled with fear and rage. As I approached Clara about her lost earrings, Janice approached us. Her expression was a mix of interest and anxiety. She inquired what I was doing, but I held out my hand to prevent her from interfering. My gaze fixed on Clara's, and I asked my query more forcefully this time. Clara was uneasy, her gaze darting about the room, and then Stephen walked over. Sensing the rising tension, he attempted to draw me away, implying that I had had too much to drink. His statements simply added to my irritation. I turned to him, my voice firm but angry, and informed him that he knew I had barely consumed any alcohol that night, so he shouldn't even propose such a silly thing. I returned to Clara, frowning at her, my patience becoming thin. The entire room became quiet as they watched the conflict develop. Clara's face grew pale and she stammered, attempting to deny any culpability, but I was able to see through her charade. Clara finally went into her bag and pulled out my earrings, albeit with shaking hands. She handed them to me with a whispered apology, averting my gaze. The pleasure I felt when I saw the earrings was nearly overpowering, but it was swiftly replaced with a rush of rage and betrayal. Janice and Stephen gazed on, shocked. Janice blushed with shame, as Stephen's expression changed from amazement to rage as he recognized what had transpired. The atmosphere was tense as the reality of class actions became clear. "I cannot believe you would do this on our wedding day," I exclaimed, my voice quivering with hurt and rage. Clara whispered another apology, but it seemed empty. This wasn't only about the earrings, it was also about trust and respect. Stephen, being fully aware of the situation, turned to Clara. His face was a mask of disappointment and rage. "How could you do it?" he demanded, his voice low yet powerful. Clara had no response. She stood there staring down at her feet, unwilling to meet anyone's gaze. The episode was the last straw, confirming all of my darkest fears about her kleptomania and strengthening my resolve to protect myself from her destructive conduct. Stephen, for the first time, stood behind me, admitting Clara's actions were inappropriate. My mother, who had been watching the entire incident develop, was considerably less polite than I had been. She fiercely shouted at Clara, saying she had no right to steal from her own family members. Janice attempted to excuse her daughter's actions, claiming they were unintentional. I'd had enough of their excuses. I went to Janice and stated, calmly but firmly, "Janice, you are well aware that your daughter has a problem. She has to go to rehab before she takes more valuable items from others." My forthright statements appeared to hit Janice hard. She opened her lips to say something, but then decided to remain silent. Clara seemed even more humiliated. My mother, still angry at Clara, said, "This is your brother's wedding, a day of celebration. How could you bring yourself to spoil it by taking something so important from our family?" As the room remained silent, I could feel our visitors' eyes on us. Their astonishment and anguish were evident. The happy atmosphere of the wedding had been marred by class actions in the days after our wedding. Stephen and I had numerous lengthy discussions regarding his sister's conduct and how we would manage her in the future. He apologized sincerely for originally questioning me and acknowledged that Clara needed expert assistance. We also chose to establish clear boundaries with her in order to protect ourselves and our future family. Stephen had a lengthy conversation with his mother, and numerous individuals contacted Janice, who firmly confirmed that Clara did have a problem. It was difficult for her to face, but the pressure from family and friends convinced her that she couldn't ignore her daughter's problems any longer. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Janice took decisive action. She arranged for Clara to visit a therapist, believing that professional aid would address the underlying concerns that were causing her kleptomania. In addition to therapy, Clara attended a kleptomaniac support group. This group helped her connect with other people who were going through similar issues, giving her the opportunity to speak up about her addiction and better understand it. Although I never contacted Clara following the incident at my wedding, I kept track of her through what Stephen told me. Despite the pain and betrayal, I felt forgiving enough to give her the benefit of the doubt and believe she might actually heal from her addiction. Clara seems to have improved dramatically over time. She even found someone in her support group who understood her hardships and later became her spouse. To our astonishment, Clara and her boyfriend staged a shotgun wedding one day, opting to keep it private. They did not invite anyone and finally notified us through Janice the night after the wedding. Stephen and I were originally taken aback by the secrecy surrounding their wedding. However, we recognized that Clara may have needed something low-key and intimate, without the strain and scrutiny of a large family gathering. Despite not being able to attend the party, we were sincerely thrilled for her and wished her the best. Unfortunately, the couple's marriage lasted just a short time. Clara's husband was discovered taking vital papers and equipment from his company, including keyboards and mice. His continuous thefts throughout the years resulted in his arrest and eventual sentence to serve time. Clara was saddened by the news, and she had nowhere to go or a work to support herself. She had no option but to go back in with Janice. Janice moved her in for a few months, but it quickly became evident that it wasn't a long-term option because she didn't have enough money to support her unemployed daughter on a monthly basis. Clara was still struggling to get back on her feet, and Janice was fed up with the situation, knowing Stephen and I lived in a larger space with no rent because we acquired it years ago. Janice contacted Stephen for assistance, asking if Clara could remain with us for a few months as she tried to get back on her feet. When Stephen brought up the idea, I was adamantly opposed. We just welcomed a gorgeous newborn boy into our life, and caring for our kid while working has been a challenge, given our hectic schedules and my unease around Clara. I didn't want her around, especially since she likes to steal. I didn't want the extra strain in our life, so I asked him whether Clara had begun searching for work. She had been unemployed for months and was sleeping at Janice's apartment, but Stephen shook his head no. However, he told me that possibly being with us would push her to work on herself, and that as her brother, he should be there for her at this tough time. Stephen also informed me that Clara had changed and was no longer a kleptomaniac, so I had no need to be concerned about her stealing from me. Despite my serious doubts about her, I reluctantly consented to let her come in, hoping that Stephen's confidence in his sister was warranted. The arrangement began when Clara moved into our guest room. She was quite pleasant and cordial to me when she first moved in, and it appeared that she had changed. However, I was on edge and kept a tight check on my possessions, just in case Clara first appeared thankful and willing to make things work. She pledged to hunt for a job and contribute to the home. However, weeks have gone. There were little signs of improvement. Clara spent the majority of her days in her room, doing nothing but sleeping in her bed, and only out when she needed to eat. I began to worry that we'd made a mistake. Stephen attempted to soothe me by reminding me that Clara needed our help. I wanted to believe him, yet the fear persisted. Despite my reservations, I continued to support Stephen's choice, believing that our assistance may make a difference in Clara's life. However, to no one's surprise, I began to notice stuff disappearing from the kitchen. For example, my pricey porcelain plate, which I typically kept for guests, inexplicably vanished when I needed it, for a visitor who had arrived to our house. Initially, I dismissed it, assuming I had misplaced it, but deep down I knew I was generally organised about such things. The doubt persisted, but I opted to reject it, believing it was merely a case of misplacement and I wouldn't have to see Clara again. My childhood cup, which I had used to sip my coffee every day for decades, disappeared one morning. This was not only strange but also a huge blow, as the mug was precious to me because it was given to me by my grandfather. When I couldn't find it, I asked Stephen for help scouring the home. He understood how much that mug meant to me. So he was concerned as well. When we couldn't find it, I suggested confronting Clara about it because I had a strong suspicion she had taken it. However, Stephen discouraged me. He argued that Clara was already going through a difficult time and urged me to let him handle the situation, so I reluctantly accepted. When Stephen confronted Clara about the missing items, she vehemently denied any involvement, claiming that we had misplaced them somewhere. I could hear their heated argument echoing through her room. It was clear that Clara refused to accept any responsibility, and Stephen, who still had a soft spot for his sister, emerged from the room to tell me that Clara was not to blame. I scoffed at his delusions. Given her history, it was difficult to believe that Clara would suddenly be innocent in this situation, frustrating me and leaving me feeling compelled to take matters into my own hands. I began storing all of my important belongings in the safe. I even went so far as to buy another safe from Amazon, specifically to protect my expensive perfume bottles and makeup items. Stephen found my actions ridiculous and accused me of not trusting his sister. We were in the midst of an argument. He even labelled me a bored stay-at-home mum, which was ridiculous given that I had a thriving freelance career and earned more than enough simply by working from home while also caring for our child full-time. I argued passionately, insisting that he had no right to call me that because I did not go to an office every day like he did. My work was no less important. I reminded him that in addition to working, I was responsible for our son and the house. I went on to explain that as long as Clara was with us, things would continue to go missing. I told him unequivocally that this was either a return to her old habits, or she had never truly stopped stealing in the first place. However, Stephen refused to believe that his sister had stolen from us. He and I were at odds over this, with him believing Clara was innocent and me wanting to protect myself and my belongings. I didn't have to wait long to have my suspicions confirmed. Stephen awoke yesterday to discover his laptop missing as he prepared for work. He initially asked if I had taken it for some reason, but I assured him that I would not have done so since I had my own laptop. He then speculated that he may have left it in the office the night before. However, things became more serious when he discovered that his wallet was also missing from the drawer downstairs, where he kept his car keys. This was a major concern, because his wallet held not only a large sum of money, but also his driver's license and credit cards. Stephen began to panic as he frantically searched the house, checking every nook and cranny in the hopes of finding his missing belongings. I could see his anxiety grow with each passing moment. Meanwhile, I sat there with a knowing smile, having already figured out who was responsible for this. Stephen's voice became increasingly worried and frustrated as he called out for Clara. There were no responses. He hurried into her room, expecting to see her, but it was empty. He continued to call for her. His voice echoed throughout the house, but there was still no response. Then he came to me and asked if I knew where she was, but I just nodded, unable to disguise my relief at being proven correct. Stephen's frustration was palpable as he repeatedly attempted to call Clara, only to be met with silence on the other end. His rage grew, and he dialed his mother's number to express his frustration. Instead of receiving the sympathy he desired, Janice attempted to calm him by downplaying the matter once more, stating that even if Clara stole his wallet, the contents inside were replaceable. This enraged Stephen even more. He burst in rage throughout the phone, telling her that Clara had no right to steal from him after defending her to me. All the time. I couldn't help but shake my head and giggle in amazement, recognizing how much this family cared for baby Clara and defended her activities, even when they faced major repercussions like these. When Clara finally decided to return home in the evening after not picking up Stephen's calls all day, she looked like she had just come from a bar. Clearly intoxicated. Stephen, who had been obsessed with fear and desperately attempting to find her, instantly confronted her about his stolen laptop and money. Clara, in her intoxicated state, sought to calm him down by denying any participation. At first, however, Stephen's aggravation was at a breaking point, and he threatened to engage the authorities if she didn't come clean about the crime. At this ultimatum, Clara broke down and emotionally revealed the truth. It turns out that Clara had opened an internet business where she had been steadily stealing from us for the last few weeks, that she had been living with us and selling our items on her site. My astonishment turned to dread when she revealed that everything she had taken from us, even my breast milk, which she said was very precious and had fetched a large amount of money. I listened in horror as Clara admitted to stealing not just Stephen's possessions, but also my valuable ceramics, including my pricey pieces and my cherished old cup. She acknowledged to stealing many other items from around the house that were laying about. Stephen, overcome with a mix of fury and betrayal, started yelling at her for betraying his trust. As I write this, Clara is still in our house, and I am totally appalled by her presence. I firmly believe she should leave our home, and I believe my husband should be more assertive in dealing with this problem. Out of all she has done, I can't believe she has been stealing my breast milk, which is intended just for my kid. I want to call the cops on her, but I know it will seriously harm my relationship with my husband. I say if I kick my sister-in-law out after she has taken everything from us. Amazing. When I shared this last week, I had no clue it would become so popular. It's hilarious that some of you have suggested I leave my spouse because of this circumstance. I'm not going to end my marriage just because Stephen has a kleptomaniac sister. Like many individuals, my spouse has a soft place for his family, which I understand and respect. Regardless of our differences about his sister, he has suffered the most, after she snatched his laptop and wallet. Also, if I neglected to write this previously, I'll say it now. Clara did return his credit cards, but she had already sold the wallet and laptop and spent the money she found in his wallet at a bar. Moving on to the main news, I reached a point last week when I had to issue an ultimatum to my spouse. Either he requested his sister to move out, or I took our son to my parents. If Clara remained to be among us, I couldn't stand living with someone who would take my breast milk to make money from random people. It was unsettling and unpleasant. Surprisingly, Stephen revealed that he had considered the same thing. He was relieved when I mentioned it and told me that he would ask her to leave. We both sat down to chat with his sister and gave her a day's notice to leave immediately. Clara panicked and contacted Janice in despair, who then called Stephen to change his decision. However, Stephen had reached his limit and insisted that Janice care for her own daughter in order for him to prioritise me and our baby. He also didn't hold back in telling Janice about all the strange stuff Clara had been stealing from us, essentially silencing her. Clara officially moved out yesterday, and I know it's not very polite of me to say so, but I'm relieved she's finally gone from our life. I quote. M. Also delighted she did what she did, because now my husband has learnt his lesson and will never ask her to stay with us. This gives me a huge sense of relief.